The Catholic community was outraged. Recruitment into the IRA soared.
Shoot up, Craig. Come on, shoot up. Take a photo of it. Shoot up, Craig. Come on. There, my fucking Lord, yeah. Shoot up, Craig.
Go back. Go home. Go home. Go home now. You only cross here. Go home now.
Go home.
Take it easy.
Get down my fucking name.
Take it easy. Come on. Break it up.
The authorities faced the classical problem of guerrilla war. How to neutralize guerrilla armies without alienating the community from which they spring.
We're not trying to excite the situation at all, obviously. What I would like is to make sure that everybody, doesn't crowd round and create a crowd, because we don't want any trouble tonight, obviously, all right?
36 hours we're taking out. You black and tan bastards.
In the intervening 7 months, over 4,000 homes, mostly Catholic, had been searched for arms. This film was shot immediately after just such a search.
You're sticking your foot down. Oh, look, Craig, this one way cameras on them bastards, and them's one way cell. Go on, you dirty rotten bastard, you cunty! Fucking go ahead! Fucking shake me! Go ahead! Fucking shake me, you bastard! Go ahead! Get off! Are you taking away? I'm sorry, are you fucking marching them dirty rotten? Are you ready?
Catholic women might vent their anger on the troops in the streets, but young Catholic men were engaging them in guerrilla war.
Oh, why don't you shut up? Watch your back!
The disaffection of the Catholic community was complete.
When they come again, and again when they come out.
With the Provisionals a potent force in Northern Ireland, there was a growing demand for stricter security measures. Outside Stormont, the Northern Ireland Parliament, Protestants demanded imprisonment without trial, internment of those suspected of being members of the Provisional IRA. Lord Carrington, British Minister of Defence, met Chichester Clark on Saturday, the 20th of March, 1971. In line with British government policy, he would commit only a few more troops to Northern Ireland and refuse to tighten security further. Chichester Clark, like O'Neill before him, had been unable to placate the Catholic community and was now unable to extract from the British sufficient to hold his cabinet together. At a cabinet meeting later that day, he resigned. Unionist politicians thought that the man capable of delivering a strong security policy was Brian Faulkner, who succeeded him a few days later.
The kernel of our immediate problems in Ulster is the law and order situation. Here, we don't need new principles. What we need are practical results on the ground. Practical results in the elimination of terrorism, in the elimination of sabotage, and in the ending of riots and disorder. The rule of law will operate in all parts of Northern Ireland so that the security which goes with the rule of law can be enjoyed quite literally by all our citizens.
Along with his firm law and order policy, Faulkner made overtures to the new moderate Catholic party, the SDLP. An accommodation seemed possible. Then the British Army shot dead 2 Catholics during a riot in Derry. The rioting intensified. The SDLP could no longer cooperate with Faulkner. Civil commotion continued. The provisional bombing campaign was escalating. 220 bombs resulted in 6 deaths in the first 6 months of 1971 alone, and provisional snipers were now shooting British soldiers. Faulkner determined to be firm. The rattle of the bin lids gave warning of internment. In the Army's first raid, 342 people had been picked up, none of them loyalists. At 11:15 that morning, Faulkner, Home Secretary as well as Prime Minister, held a press conference.
Every means has been tried to make terrorists amenable to the law. But the terrorist campaign continues at an unacceptable level. And I have had to conclude that the ordinary law cannot deal comprehensively or quickly enough with such ruthless viciousness. I have therefore decided, after weighing all the relevant considerations, including the views of the security authorities, and after consultation with Her Majesty's government in the United Kingdom last Thursday, to exercise, where necessary, the powers of detention and internment vested in me as Minister of Home Affairs.
There was a violent reaction by Catholics. Shops and factories were burnt. Riots in Derry, Newry, Strabane, Armagh, as well as Belfast, went on for 4 days and left 22 dead. In the Ardoyne district of Belfast, Protestants abandoned their homes before Catholic intimidation, burning them as they left to prevent Catholics occupying them. Over 200 houses were gutted as families fled. In the wake of these events, there were 7,000 refugees. It had been the worst spate of violence since 1969. Faulkner, needing to placate Unionists, had to be seen to be firm. Internment had been under consideration for some time as an alternative to a full-scale military offensive against the Provisionals. Its successful use in the late 50s convinced Faulkner that it would be effective. 1,500 people were interned. 2/3 of them had been released by the end of the year.
Going to work. What do you work?
In security terms, it was not successful. Many Republicans got wind of it and slipped away. Provisionals were able to give a press conference at a school in West Belfast 4 days after the army had swooped. Their claims that the leadership was intact were substantially true. Certainly key figures escaped arrest. Joe Cahill, leading provisional.
Up to the present, we have lost one brigade officer, one battalion officer, and the rest are volunteers, or as they say in the British Army, privates. We've lost 2 senior officers.
Where's that, in the whole of Belfast?
In Belfast, yeah.
The army, who had opposed internment on the grounds that they were not well enough informed to pick up the right people, put a brave face on it.
Well, I don't know that I go so far as to say completely beaten, but they've taken a tremendous knock. There are still gunmen around, but they appear to be much more disorganized than they were before and don't seem to have much leadership or pattern.
Again, punitive measures against the provisionals had resulted in massive Catholic alienation from the army and government. Stories, largely true, of physical and mental maltreatment of internees were rife in the Catholic community. Later, Britain was found guilty at the European Court of Human Rights of inhuman and degrading treatment. Catholic children stayed away from school as a huge rent and rate strike was organized in Catholic areas. Moderate Catholic politicians resorted to the traditional political protest in Ireland, rejecting the government by setting up at Dungiven an alternative assembly.
And the leader of that section of opinion, then Sir Edward Carson, said in Coleraine on the 21st of December 1912, "In the event of this proposed Parliament being thrust upon us, we solemnly and mutually pledge ourselves not to recognize its authority. I do not care twopence if it is treason or not. Today, we do not recognize the authority of the Stormont Parliament, and we do not care twopence whether it is treason or not."
The provisionals answered internment with the bomb and the gun. Up to August, only 15 members of the security forces had been killed. Within 4 months of internment, 41 had died. In the same 4 months, 66 civilians were killed and 1,078 injured. Warnings were usually given, but some bombs were ill-timed, some warnings inadequate, some bombings unclaimed. The campaign was designed to inflict maximum damage on the commercial life of the province. The need to guard the city centres stretched the security forces. It also gave the provisionals a breathing space. One particularly devastating technique was the car bomb. A demonstration that internment had not defeated the provisionals. Media coverage of these spectacular explosions brought them wide attention.
It wasn't a bomb, but it was an ambush, because when the troops arrived, fire was opened up down the road. Man hurt there. Wait.
Over there, look, over there, over there.
Ambulance! Get the ambulance there! There we are. There we are. There we are. Hold on, there we are.
First aid kit! Come on. First aid kit!
Okay. Never mind down there.
And I want to tell them today that there are thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of loyalists just as good as the men of 1912 who, when the crunch comes, will show Mr. Lynch and his fellow travelers the Humes and the Currys and the Devlins, male and female. Let it not go out from this meeting that we are an irresponsible bunch of hotheads. Let it go out that we're cool, cold, determined loyalists who will never surrender and who are prepared.
On a winter Saturday, civil rights activists marched along the seashore to McGilligan Camp near Derry, where many local internees were held. They were met firstly by the police, and then by the 1st Battalion of the Parachute Regiment. John Hume led the protest.
Could you tell me on what authority that you're holding us back here from walking on
this is a prohibited area. You're not allowed in a prohibited area, and against 3 miles
Under what law? Would you ask those men to stop firing rubber bullets? Women, please.
They will not. They'll stop it, provided you keep away from the wire and don't try to enter this prohibited area.
Under what law is it prohibited, or under what authority is it prohibited? Can you tell me?
It will be prohibited by the police and by the government.
Well, the police tell me that it's you that is in command here, not them.
I am police of the military here, because this is a military area. And an authority of the government is to be decreed a prohibited area.
Yeah, and are you proud of the way your men have treated this crowd today?
This crowd tried to come in a prohibited area. You, as a member of parliament, was trying to stop them.
And you shot them with rubber bullets and gas. The crowd was marching over there. The leaders were going to speak to you. Before we even got there, you opened fire.
That's right.
Fire was open after it came through the wire.
No, it was not. No, it was not. Fire was open as the crowd was coming across the beach.
Hume, I'm not here to enter an argument with you.
No, I'm not here either. But I wouldn't be very proud of the conduct of your men today. They're a crowd of people, and they're totally unarmed people, as you can see for yourself.
If you lead all people away, then we'll go away too.
Yeah, but we want to march in there.
Well, not march in here.
Why not? It doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to you. You can't prohibit it.
It's been prohibited by your government.
Whose government?
The government of Northern Ireland.
Not our government. And that's why you're here, because it's not our government.
Demonstrations had been banned at the time of internment. But on Sunday, the 30th of January, several thousand people in Derry marched towards the city centre. All factions in the Catholic community united against internment under the banner of civil rights. The army and police decided not to stop the march for fear of violence, but to contain it within the Bogside. At the junction of William Street and Rossville Street, the marchers passed the army barricades. A substantial number of marchers broke away from the march and turned towards the army barricade. ritual battle began. Then the crowds fell back before the CS gas. Units waited behind the army barricades, ready to launch an arrest operation. They were members of the 1st Battalion of the Parachute Regiment, known to be one of the toughest regiments serving in Northern Ireland. Just before 4 o'clock, they were ordered in. Most of the rioters had dispersed.
Put him out of the way there. Stand back and let him go. Let him go.
Shooting had begun when a soldier opened fire on an alleged nail bomber. In all, 108 rounds of live ammunition were fired by the army.
Run, you mad bastard!
John, to the police. Sorry.
They just came in firing. There was no provocation whatsoever.
Firing what, rubber bullets?
No, it was lead bullets they fired. They seemed to fire in all directions. There's some rubber bullets too. They didn't even seem to fire gas. It was completely outrageous, disgraceful. I don't know. They call themselves an army. It's utterly disgraceful, I think.
Are you quite sure that nothing was fired at them first?
There was nothing fired at them, sir. I'm absolutely certain of that. I can speak of this without any difficulty whatsoever because I was there. I was just standing at the flats when the Saracens moved in, first of all, and there was nothing fired at them, positively nothing fired at them whatsoever. There weren't even stones fired at them. People ran in all directions and they opened fire. Most people had their backs to them when they opened fire at the time.
A short while ago, we filmed you leading the way with a white handkerchief.
Yes.
For a party who were carrying a boy who was dead or dying. Now, how was he shot?
That little boy was shot when he was running away. He was just a little bit behind me when he fell. I heard the shot. I looked around. I saw him down.
You saw him?
Yes. And he was shot.
He was a young man, wasn't he?
He was a young boy, I would say, about 15, thereabouts.
He didn't have a weapon?
No, he had nothing. He was just a young boy about 15. He was running. I was running too.
Colonel, once the paratroopers went into the bogside, there seemed to have been a very large number of casualties.
Well, I suppose large, 5 is quite large in these circumstances. It's unfortunate But when we got up there, past William Street here where we're standing, and up towards Rossville Flats, we came under fire. We came under fire from the bottom of the flats, from the flats. We were also petrol bombed, and some acid, in fact, was poured on us from the top of the flats.
Local people are saying that you used excessive force when you went in there.
Well, what is force? If you're being fired at, you return fire, and they know that perfectly well.
How many gunmen do you feel you've hit in the Bogside?
Well, I'm told from my quick sit rep, and you must understand it's a very quick sit rep, that 3 gunmen were hit. We have not got the weapons, but this is the usual thing. We saw people come forward. I'm not going to say that I saw weapons taken away, because I don't know yet. I have not spoken to the men on the ground, although I was forward when the shooting was going on.
You have no worries about this action?
None at all.
"13 Catholic men, 7 in their teens, had been shot dead by the army. 13 more were wounded. What really happened that day remains contentious. A government inquiry concluded, none of the deceased or wounded is proved to have been shot whilst handling a firearm or bomb, but added, there is a strong suspicion that some others had been firing weapons or handling bombs. The Londonderry coroner differed. The army ran amok that day, he said. It was sheer, unadulterated murder. Nearly all the dead were shot in the back. In the days that followed, British policy in Northern Ireland was questioned. In Dublin, angry crowds burnt down the British embassy. In America, influential politicians made distinctly hostile speeches, and in England, too, grave concern was voiced. As the dead were buried, there was further polarization between the two communities. Nationalists, rejecting British rule and its agent, the army, felt a grief mixed with rage. Unionists feared that the backlash might force Britain to be more receptive to nationalist feelings. In the wake of the shootings, there had been protests across the province in nationalist areas: Fermanagh, Belfast, Armagh, and Tyrone. At Aldershot, in England, the headquarters of the regiment responsible for Bloody Sunday was attacked. 7 died. The Provisional IRA had announced they would avenge the deaths of Bloody Sunday. Over the next 3 months, there were 381 bombs, 56 deaths. 27 members of the security forces were killed. Republican violence escalated. Scenes like these, and the belief that the British government was soft on violence, made Protestants demand tough measures.